Dad died in a fire trying to save his white Moonlight's daughter. I rushed to the hospital overnight, and when I first saw him, I couldn't suppress the smile at the corners of my mouth. A staff member kindly reminded me, "Keep your laughter down, please." Yet after collecting my father's ashes, I laughed even louder. My dear father, if you had to go, then just go. How could they not leave a will, bequeathing me billions in assets? How very considerate. Dad died saving Sophie. When I heard the news, I rushed to the hospital overnight. He lay on the morgue's bed, his face burned beyond recognition, with not a single patch of skin left on his body. I couldn't help myself when I saw it. The staff nearby couldn't stand it anymore and nudged my arm to remind me, "Keep your laughter down." I apologized with my words, but when it was time to get the death certificate, I practically skipped there. As soon as the certificate was ready, I wasted no time having Dad cremated. While waiting for the ashes, I contacted his lawyer and confirmed Dad hadn't left a will. Dad had no wife, no illegitimate children, just me on the household register. Naturally, the inheritance was all mine. I hurried to transfer all the assets under my name, the luxury villa in the west of the city, the companies under his name, the sports cars in the garage. Oh, and the house Dad had lent to Sophie. I didn't like the idea of my property being tainted, so on a sunny afternoon, I paid her a visit and asked her to move out. To my surprise, when Sophie saw me, she didn't even open the door and instead called the police right away. The moment the police arrived, the door swung open instantly. Sophie jumped out from inside, pointed at me and said, "It's her. She's trespassing." I hurriedly explained, "Officer, don't listen to her nonsense. I just knocked on the door, I didn't force my way in." "That wasn't knocking, you were practically trying to break my door down," Sophie said, grabbing one officer's arm while continuously pointing at me. "Hurry up and take her away." The officer's expression became somewhat indescribable as he shook off Sophie's hand and looked at me. "What's going on here?" he asked. I put on an innocent face. "I really just knocked on the door. Does that count as breaking and entering?" "You call this not breaking and entering? To put it bluntly, this could be considered provocation, you know?" After hearing the officer's words, Sophie's face was brimming with smugness. "Officer, but this house is mine. Is it illegal for me to knock on my own door?" I directly pulled out the property deed and ID card from my bag to show them. One of the officers took the documents and carefully compared them to my face, confirming it was indeed my house. Frowning, he asked, "This is your home, don't you have the keys?" I immediately pouted, "Someone is occupying my house and refusing to leave." "Officer, do you think this counts as property encroachment?" Sophie jumped in, "What do you mean your house? This is clearly Uncle Harrow's house." "Just wait, I'll call Uncle Harrow right now and have him come deal with you." In front of everyone, Sophie called Dad several times in a row. After none of the calls went through, she clearly started to panic. "Stop calling," I laughed softly. "You won't get through." "Don't get cocky, Selena. Uncle Harrow must just be busy." I laughed even more cheerfully. "That's right, busy rushing to be reincarnated." Sophie's face darkened, her voice turning shrill. "Selena, what do you mean by that? Uncle Harrow is your own father. How dare you curse him to die? Don't think I won't tell Uncle Harrow about this, he'll definitely break your legs." "Oh, I'm so terrified," I said, crossing my arms with complete indifference. "Too bad he'll never hear your complaints again." "Sophie, have you forgotten? Just a couple of days ago, when your school caught fire, my dad happened to be there delivering something for you. The moment he heard your classroom was burning, he rushed in to save you. But he couldn't find you, and ended up burning to death instead." I sighed dramatically. "What a shame. He cared for you more than his own daughter, yet he didn't even get to see your face one last time before he died." "You're lying. You're cursing Uncle Harrow." Sophie froze for a few seconds before becoming agitated, even raising her hand to hit me. I quickly dodged behind a nearby police officer. "Help! Murder! Officer, arrest her right now." Having observed the commotion, the officers now understood the situation. One of them restrained Sophie while keeping us far apart. They urged Sophie to calm down while giving me a verbal warning. Even the wisest judge can't settle family disputes, and the two officers knew they couldn't get too involved. They eventually took us to the station for statements. As we were released, I overheard one officer tell Sophie, "Since the house belongs to them now, you shouldn't be so aggressive. If you want to keep living there, talk properly with them. If not, move out quickly." I immediately felt respect for this policeman and almost saluted him. Just as I stepped out of the police station, Sophie's mother Linda rushed over. When she saw me, she still managed to put on her hypocritical smile. "Selena, when did you return? Why didn't you tell Mom? I could have come with your father to pick you up." "Hold it right there. Aunt Linda, let's not rush into playing family. I came back this time to collect my father's corpse." "Oh right." I covered my mouth and laughed twice. "Your wedding with my dad is in a week, right? Better notify the relatives quickly, lest you end up holding a wedding without the groom. What a joke that would be." Hearing this, Linda's fake expression finally cracked. She sneered, "Selena, no matter how much you dislike me, you shouldn't curse your father. He's been decent to you." Decent indeed. Killed my mother for the sake of his first love. Kicked me straight out of the house for someone who wasn't even his adopted daughter. What a wonderfully decent father the world has produced. Aunt Linda doesn't believe me? I pouted. Well, that makes sense. After all, you and my dad never actually got married, so the hospital wouldn't notify you as family. It's just tough on me, a junior, having to handle such a major life event for the first time. I took my father's death certificate out of my bag and tossed it right in front of the mother and daughter. Linda's face instantly turned ashen, and she staggered, barely able to stand, barely supported by Sophie. "Sophie," I glanced at her, "I'm selling the apartment you're living in. You have 1 week to move out, or I'll call the police. Oh, and Aunt Linda, you'll have to move out of that villa too. But since you've lived there so long, you must have accumulated quite a lot. Don't worry, I'll help you find a moving company. As for all the jewelry my dad gave you, no need to return it. Consider it compensation for all these years you spent by his side without any real status." With that, I put on my sunglasses and walked away without a hint of emotion. Behind me, I heard Sophie scream and Linda fainting to the ground. The next day, I went to the bank again. My father lived his life with extreme caution. Anything of real value was never kept at home, always locked away in a bank vault. Had he stored these things in his own villa, Linda would have transferred them long ago. There's no way I'd have inherited anything. I looked at those big gold bars and small antiques, grinning from ear to ear. After counting them all, I went through the procedures, and these treasures officially became mine. Overjoyed by this day, I headed straight to a 6-star hotel for a lavish lunch. Once my stomach was full and my thirst quenched, I decided to go home and take a beauty nap. Just as my car drove into the villa area, the security guard stopped me. The guard quietly pulled me aside and whispered, "Selena, that mistress aunt of yours is here." "Auntie mistress?" I thought for a moment before realizing he was talking about Linda. That year, my father kicked me out of the villa when I was seriously ill just for her sake. The whole neighborhood knew about it, and many people came to curse Linda back then. So after my mother passed away, the two of them never lived here again. They came with a very fierce woman who claimed to be your aunt. I didn't want to let them in at first, but the captain. No doubt Linda must have offered some kind of bribe. I smiled and said to him, "Thank you, big brother security guard. I understand." I saw how furious they looked. They already entered the passcode and went inside. "Be careful." The security guard brother was genuinely worried about my safety. I thanked him again, and as my eyes glanced over, I spotted his baton. An idea immediately came to mind. I said to the man in front of me, "Brother security guard, could I buy that baton from you?" Before entering, I first checked the surveillance footage. I saw my aunt sitting in the living room with Linda and Sophie. My aunt was looking around at the decorations in my living room and even casually slipped a small antique into her bag. I saved this segment of the footage. Then I composed myself, walked to the door, entered the passcode, and charged in with a stun baton. Ah! Thieves! Damn thieves! Damn thieves! I'll beat you to death. I closed my eyes and swung the stun baton wildly. I heard a few screams, and finally, my aunt's shrill voice. Selena, you did that on purpose. Look closely at who I am. I swung a couple more times before stopping. Pretending to be surprised, I said, Auntie, what are you doing here? My aunt's face was covered in red marks, with some areas already turning blue. She glared at me furiously. Selena, you little bitch, how dare you hit your elder? You'll be punished by heaven for this. I continued playing innocent. Auntie, your words are too harsh. You all came without notifying me first. When I saw people in the living room, naturally I thought they were burglars. After all, my house has so many antiques, who'd notice if one went missing? Hearing this, my aunt suddenly moved her handbag behind her back. She cleared her throat and said, Selena, your father hasn't been dead for long, and you've already had him cremated. You should have informed your elders. Elders? If I remember correctly, my grandmother has already passed away. What other elders are there in this family? Selena, no matter what, she's your father's sister, your own aunt. It's not appropriate for you to speak like that. Linda chimed in again, putting on her elder airs. Not born from the same parents, yet still considered family? I sneered. My biological grandfather passed away early, and my grandmother remarried with my father in tow. This aunt is the first daughter from my step-grandfather's previous marriage with another woman. So biologically, we share no relation whatsoever. Selena. My aunt exploded in rage. Linda beside her patted her shoulder, reminding her to stick to the main agenda. The aunt composed herself, assuming an air of magnanimity. Your father's dead, and the family needs someone fair to speak up. I heard you've hogged all the inheritance, that's not right. You need to share the money with your Aunt Linda. Why should we share? I sneered. Aunt Linda never registered her marriage with my dad, did she? I'd already checked with Dad's lawyer. Aunt Linda and my father had planned to register their marriage the day before the wedding. What a pity. But she was about to marry your father, my aunt said. Except they never did. The state doesn't recognize it, so why should I? Probably angered by my words, my aunt's face instantly turned pale. Linda pretended to be the good person on the side. Selena, it's not that I insist on fighting over this inheritance, but mainly because I currently have. She touched her belly, hesitating to speak. I said to her, spit it out if you've got something to say. Sophie immediately stepped forward. Selena, you're such a bitch, biting anyone you see. Can't you tell? My mom is pregnant with your dad's child. Even if you don't share the inheritance with my mom, this child still has the right to inherit. I sneered, who can prove this is my dad's child? Auntie interrupted, I can vouch for this. Selena, we only tolerated you because you're a child and didn't want to make things ugly. Otherwise, we would have sued you long ago. I laughed even louder. Then go ahead and sue me. Madwoman. Absolute madwoman. Auntie grabbed Linda's hand and started dragging her out. I told you there's no reasoning with this bastard child. Let's go find a lawyer. As the three of them headed for the door, I called out, hold on. Auntie turned back, sneering, having second thoughts? Sophie, Aunt Linda, I'm reminding you one more time, you have to move out the day after tomorrow, or I'll just change the locks. Then where are we supposed to live? Sophie was furious. What does that have to do with me? If you really have nowhere to go, go live with your biological father. The aunt and the other two came with great momentum but left fuming. Each of them had injuries on their faces. Seeing them like that, I laughed so hard I could barely stand up straight. Within 2 days, I received a lawyer's letter. I immediately forwarded it to my attorney and let him handle the matter. 2 more days passed, and my lawyer informed me that the opposing counsel wanted to meet for private negotiations to settle this case. They must have realized how difficult this lawsuit would be. After all, my father had already turned to ashes. There was absolutely no way to prove whether the child in Linda's belly was his. As for collateral relatives, my paternal grandparents had long passed away, leaving nothing but their cremated remains. How could a paternity test even be conducted? On a calm and sunny afternoon, I arrived punctually at my lawyer's office. My aunt and Linda had come earlier. Linda declared, "This child is yours and your father's." With a cold expression, I demanded, "Proof?" Their lawyer pulled out a document from his briefcase. "Here's our paternity test report." I picked up the paper and froze instantly. Linda stroked her belly with a smug expression. "Your dad lived with me for so long, there must be some stray hairs or beard stubble left around the house. Plenty for a paternity test." My aunt looked even more triumphant than her. "Aunt Linda here is carrying a boy, your own blood brother. Besides, you moved out long ago. Getting half the inheritance is already a steal for you." I furrowed my brows, staring at the document for a long time before suddenly throwing my head back with laughter. "Aunt Linda, if I'd done something like this, I'd be too ashamed to admit it. I never expected you'd actually produce a test report." Linda's face instantly darkened. What are you implying?" "My dad was sterile, didn't he ever tell you?" I pulled out a document from my bag and slammed it on the table. It was my father's medical record showing he'd had a vasectomy 20 years ago. Back when my mom was pregnant with me, she kept dreaming about him cheating. She'd wake up crying every day, paranoid. Heartbroken for her, Dad went straight to the hospital for the procedure without a word. Linda turned pale. But her lawyer stayed composed. "Even after a vasectomy, it's possible to reverse it. Reversing it would require another surgery. Do you have any proof my dad underwent that procedure?" They exchanged glances. Clearly, they hadn't prepared for this. I went on, "Dad loved Mom dearly back then, until he met Aunt Linda. Speaking of which, Aunt Linda sure has some skills, doesn't she? How did she manage to get pregnant by a man who'd been snipped? Unless, of course, this so-called little brother isn't his at all. Wouldn't be surprising, after all, everyone knows Aunt Linda's the other woman." "Selena, you shameless wretch." Linda slammed the table, her elegance completely shattered. "Your father and I truly loved each other. We were together first, your mother was the other woman." Hearing her insult, my mother wiped the smile off my face instantly. I stood up too. "Linda, do you really think I don't know your dirty little secret? You dumped my dad when he was poor. Then after my dad met my mom, when my grandfather gave him his first investment, and after he made it big, suddenly you reappeared claiming to be his true love? Without my mom, my dad would have been nothing." As I spoke, tears blurred my vision. Our family of 3 used to be so happy. But one winter, Linda showed up with Sophie in tow. From that day on, my mother lost her husband. I lost my father. Dad's heart always belonged to Linda. Whenever she called, he'd come running like a dog to its master. Later, when my mom developed kidney failure, my dad filed for divorce. Feeling guilty, he decided to donate one of his kidneys to her. On the day of the surgery, Linda threw herself into the sea. When Dad heard, he ran straight to her. That same day, my mother died. Mom could have lived. If Dad hadn't wanted to donate from the beginning, I could have given my kidney to Mom. But everything was already settled when Linda chose to jump into the sea that day. She knew perfectly well how important that day was. After that incident, I had a huge fight with my father. The very next day, Linda and Sophie moved into another villa my father owned. Furious, I went to confront them. But Sophie accused me of stealing her things. My father didn't believe me and made me apologize to Sophie. In anger, I walked out of that house. Remembering this, I wiped away tears and put my sunglasses back on, transforming back into that cold, emotionless rich woman. "You can't prove this bastard child in your belly is my brother, so there's no point continuing this conversation. Come back when you find proof of Dad's surgery if you want to discuss inheritance. I grabbed my bag and left without hesitation. The chances of her finding that proof were zero. I'd already investigated. Dad never went through with the vasectomy. He changed his mind right on the operating table. That medical record was completely fabricated. If this went to court, I might not even dare present it. I thought this matter would be over after that, and Linda and my aunt would finally quiet down. But who knew that the very next day, my aunt showed up at my house with a group of people, demanding that I repay the money. I had just woken up and was still groggy with sleep. What money are you talking about? Your dad borrowed 100,000 yuan from our family back in the day and never paid it back. Now that he's dead, you should return it to us. My aunt directly slapped a yellowed piece of paper on the table. I glanced down at it. It was indeed an IOU, with my father's signature and fingerprint on it, dated 20 years ago. I knew about this debt. Back then, my dad had just started his business and ran into financial difficulties, so he was borrowing money from everywhere. When he approached my aunt, she was reluctant at first. My dad promised to repay double, so he borrowed 50,000 yuan from her, but the IOU stated 100,000. Later, after my dad overcame the crisis and went to repay the money, my aunt refused to take it and instead asked him to buy her family an apartment. Over the past 20 years, my aunt had repeatedly brought up those 50,000 yuan, and I have no idea how many benefits she squeezed out of my dad. And now she still has the nerve to come here and ask for more. I laughed. Auntie, is your memory failing you, or is mine? Wasn't that money returned to your family long ago? The house you used to live in, wasn't it paid for by my dad? My aunt shamelessly replied, that house was a gift from your dad, not a repayment. One thing is one thing, you can't just deny this IOU, can you? I won't deny the IOU. 100,000, right? I'll transfer it to you right now. 100,000 from 20 years ago isn't the same as 100,000 today. Now you have to give me at least. She calculated and held up one finger. 1 million. You really have the nerve to ask. I put away my phone and smiled at her. I could give you 1 million, but I'm afraid you wouldn't have time to spend it. You cursing me? You already brought death to your own parents, now planning to drag me down too? Too bad for you, I'm tough as nails. With a cold laugh, I asked for her bank account details and transferred 1 million on the spot. The moment the money arrived, my aunt's face lit up with greed. Before she and her group could even leave the villa, I picked up the phone and called the police. Hello, I'd like to report a break-in and robbery, are you going to do something about it? Upon hearing this, my aunt immediately rushed back to snatch my phone. You little bitch, how dare you call the police? I've been practicing taekwondo since childhood, so dealing with a middle-aged woman was quite easy. I then turned to the people behind her and said, aren't you leaving yet? If you stay any longer, you'll become accomplices. The group exchanged glances and instantly left in unison. Seeing she had no backup, my aunt lost her former arrogance. Selena, we're family, no need to talk about robbery. Auntie will return the money to you right now. The money hadn't even been in her account for 10 minutes before it was back in my hands. Auntie, why couldn't you have done this earlier? We could have just talked things through. After counting the exact amount, I calmly put my phone away. Auntie quickly said, yes, that's right. What about when the police arrive? Don't worry, I patted Auntie's shoulder and gave her a knowing look. In less than 10 minutes, the police arrived. Officers, this is just a misunderstanding. Auntie stepped forward first to smooth things over. My niece and I were just fooling around. The two police officers looked at me. I said, a misunderstanding? Not robbery, it's theft. I immediately retrieved the surveillance footage of my aunt stealing my small antique and handed it over to the police. My aunt turned pale instantly and rushed over to explain. Auntie can return it to you, I just thought this little thing was dirty and took it home to clean it. I waved my little hand dismissively. I don't want to hear it, I don't want to hear it. On the day my aunt's case was filed, I returned to my hometown to deliver some celebratory gifts to the neighbors. Unexpectedly, someone posted about my actions online, accompanied by a 500-word narrative. The gist of the content was, killing her own father, sending her biological aunt to prison, refusing to acknowledge her stepmother and younger brother, all to monopolize the family fortune. They portrayed me as a money-hungry, ruthless woman who would stop at nothing for wealth, completely devoid of familial bonds. The video quickly went viral after being reposted by dozens of self-media accounts, and my name instantly trended on social media. The comments were flooded with people calling me heartless, branding me a murderer. I couldn't help but laugh at the absurdity. No need to guess, this was definitely Sophie's doing. She's currently studying at Media College, and her class is taught by a famous internet celebrity who trended last year. Their assignment was literally to grow self-media accounts. Back then, Sophie frequently appeared in her classmates' videos due to her good looks, earning her the title of the most pure campus belle. 2/3 of those reposting accounts belonged to her classmates. My lawyer saw an opportunity and called to ask if I wanted to file a lawsuit. I told him, no need. Let the bullets fly for a while. After waiting 2 more days, I received a threatening package. I kept these as evidence and immediately handed them over to my lawyer. Within half a day, Sophie's classmates caved in. One by one, they issued public apologies, and the original account quickly deleted the video. Despite this, many people still cursed me online, accusing me of using money to suppress the and having no humanity. That same night, a social media account claiming to be my friend exposed the truth. The whole situation wasn't at all what had been spread online. They directly called out Linda, revealing how she had interfered in my parents' relationship, how she and her daughter had played the victim, and how Sophie had taken what wasn't hers. They also detailed how miserable my life had been after being kicked out of the house. Not only did I have to work to pay my tuition, but I often had to scavenge through garbage dumps. Public opinion flipped overnight. Soon, many of Sophie's high school classmates came forward with their own stories. They revealed that Sophie had bullied a female classmate so severely in high school that the girl attempted suicide by jumping off a building. Sophie went from being the school's pure and beloved beauty to a universally despised villain. And right at this moment, I sent her a lawyer's letter, suing Sophie for spreading rumors and defaming me. The next day, Linda showed up at my door. By then, her belly was noticeably swollen. The moment she saw me, she began apologizing. Selena, Sophie was wrong in this matter, but she didn't mean it. She's young and doesn't understand the past. She was just talking nonsense. I didn't take it seriously. 21 is still young? She's old enough to have children. Linda's expression changed, becoming even more pitiful. Selena, tell me, what should Auntie do to make you feel better? I knew that expression of hers all too well. Every time she made that face before, Dad would abandon us. Thinking of all the suffering Mom endured, my face contorted with emotion. Want me to feel better? Fine. Go to my mother's grave, kowtow 3 times, and admit you were wrong. Then I'll drop the lawsuit. Linda's face turned ashen. Selena, you. Take it or leave it. In the end, Linda couldn't bear to see Sophie suffer and actually agreed to the deal on the spot. We arranged to meet 3 days later at my mother's gravestone. 3 days later, the moment I stepped out, 2 tall, burly guys dragged me into the bushes and beat me up. After they finished, one of them threatened me, saying, if you ever bother Sophie again, it won't just be a beating next time. After they left, I crawled out of the bushes. I found my phone and immediately called the police. Sophie might be an idiot, but the people around her aren't any smarter. Seriously, this is a high-end gated community. There are surveillance cameras everywhere, not just in the bushes, but even at the bottom of the swimming pool. While I was getting treated at the hospital, the police gave me an update. Turns out those 2 college guys had no backbone. They spilled everything after just a few questions. They did know Sophie, but she hadn't put them up to it. She'd just cried to them, and they decided I was the villain, so they took it upon themselves to deliver justice. Some justice, they ended up delivering themselves straight to jail. I firmly refused any settlement. During my hospitalization, the families of those two kept coming to see me. They brought gifts and apologized profusely, the same way their children had arrogantly beaten me. Their parents now groveled with equal humility. "Selena, we beg you to be magnanimous and forgive our child. When he gets out, he'll kneel and apologize to you personally, whatever it takes." I couldn't possibly accept that. Through tears, I recounted my innocence and Sophie's wickedness, hinting that if I dropped the charges, Sophie might just manipulate them into attacking me again. Both families were sharp enough to take the hint. They immediately stopped pestering me and went straight for Sophie and Linda instead. "Now those two don't even dare leave their homes," my lawyer told me. "The moment they step outside, they get cursed out." Turns out those two families pack quite a punch. Of course they're strong. These are battle-hardened middle-aged women. Their output is nothing like Linda's usual delicate act. I can just picture Linda, trying to maintain her image while whimpering, probably clutching her stomach and crying at the same time. The lawyer asked if I still wanted to appeal against Sophie. I said, "Of course, I'm not taking this beating for nothing." In the end, those two male college students were forced to apologize to me. I also managed to squeeze some compensation out of them, nothing much, just 100,000 or so. For an ordinary family, this would already be a devastating blow. Afterwards, Linda kept calling me non-stop, probably still trying to talk me into dropping the lawsuit. I ended up blocking her number. I could pretty much piece together what happened. Linda had agreed with me, then changed her mind at the last minute and told Sophie about it, which is why Sophie sent people to beat me up. I'm not making any more promises now. Who knows if I'll get another beating. I saw Linda again 5 months later. By then, I had returned to the city where I attended university. Just after class ended, I received a call from my academic advisor saying a person claiming to be my relative was waiting for me at the gate. When I reached the entrance, there was Linda. The moment she saw me, she fell to her knees with a thud. "Selena, please, I beg you, save your brother." Many people around us turned to look, but I didn't feel the slightest embarrassment. I let her stay kneeling. Linda clutched my hand desperately, sobbing, "Please save him. Your brother was born with a heart condition and needs surgery at a major hospital, but I don't have enough money. He really is your father's child, your own brother, I'm begging you." Linda had no education or work experience. She had always relied on men to support her. At first, it was her ex-husband. Later, when she heard my father had made it big, she found some excuse to dump that man and came back to my father. Though all the assets were left to me after Dad's death, he had previously bought her things and transferred money amounting to 2 million yuan. Linda's ex-husband had also left her an apartment. This already surpassed the living standards of most people. Logically speaking, as long as she budgeted carefully, she could live quite comfortably for the rest of her life. However, it's easy to go from frugality to extravagance, but hard to go from extravagance back to frugality. Sophie was accustomed to living like a little princess, used to buying whatever she wanted whenever she pleased. For a while, she couldn't accept having to cook for herself, going out without a driver, or only being able to afford bags that cost a few thousand yuan, the kind ordinary people buy. What she found most unbearable was that she had originally planned to study abroad right after graduating from college, using her family's money. But now, with legal troubles hanging over her and only a small sum left at home, studying abroad was out of the question. Even a simple trip would require hesitation. Then, influenced by someone, it's unclear who, she somehow picked up gambling. Within a month, all the money Linda and Sophie had was gambled away. When Linda found out, she was so furious that it triggered premature labor, and she was rushed to the hospital. The baby was born prematurely and was later diagnosed with a heart condition requiring surgery, a procedure that would need to be done at a major hospital, costing a significant amount in medical fees. Linda simply didn't have that kind of money. Ever since her fall from grace, the wealthy socialites she used to associate with had distanced themselves as far as possible. All those so-called connections of hers had been built through my father. Now that he was gone, those people naturally wanted nothing to do with her. Looking at her kneeling and begging me like this, I suddenly remembered years ago, on the day my mother passed away, I was kneeling just like this, begging her. Begging her to release my father so he could complete the surgery together. At that time, Linda was as cold as a stranger. This is your mother's fate. So what if he's my father's child? I laughed. This is his fate. Linda seemed to have thought of something, trembling all over. Selena, I know you hate me, think I stole your father from you, but you need to understand, I really never did anything to hurt your mother. You didn't directly hurt my mother, no, you just drove a wedge between my father. The one who hurt my mother was my father. I hate him, so there's no way I'd save his son. I lifted my foot to walk away. The child is innocent. Linda cried her heart out, crawling over to cling to my leg. Don't you want me to kneel and apologize at your mother's grave? I'll go kneel, I just beg you to save my child. I stopped in my tracks and looked down at her. Fine, go kneel. It had been a long time since I last visited my mother. Ever since she passed away, I hadn't been able to accept it. That's why I applied to a university far from home. The moment Linda knelt down, the clear sky turned overcast, and heavy rain poured down. She kowtowed 3 times in front of my mother's tombstone, repeating I'm sorry and I was wrong 3 times. Then she looked up at me, her pale lips uttering 2 words. Selena. I've already transferred the money to your card. From now on, whether this boy lives or dies has nothing to do with me. Linda stood up, thanked me, then walked away in the rain. I looked at my mother's tombstone and whispered, Mom, I came to see you. Have you been blaming me for not visiting for so long? Mom, Dad died, he died saving Sophie. Don't be angry yet, but, he called me right before he died. I never expected Dad would call me before he died. By then, he must have already been trapped with no way out. Logically, he should have called the firefighters, but he called me instead. He said he was wrong, that he was sorry. Maybe people remember many things when death is near. I was about to hang up after hearing those words when he added that only now did he finally see Sophie's true nature. He'd gone into the fire to save her, only to end up trapped himself. When Sophie was rescued, she clearly saw him, he shouted at her several times. But she just walked away as if she hadn't heard a thing. If Sophie had turned back to give him a hand, or done anything else, he wouldn't have died. Hearing these words, I felt nothing and simply replied with 4 words, then just die. I had long stopped seeing him as my father. The first time he abandoned me for Sophie was the final straw. Despite my excellent grades, he never once attended a parent-teacher meeting for me. Yet at just a casual remark from Sophie, he'd come running eagerly. I'll never forget those days when my mother cried herself to sleep every night. Despite being seriously ill, just because Linda mentioned feeling unwelcome, my father kicked my mother out of the house. I can't imagine how we survived those dark days. It's all karma catching up to him. I shared countless words with my mother, and when we finished, the sky cleared. After coming down the mountain, I sold all the properties and cars I owned in this city and settled directly in the city where I attended university. Later, I heard that Sophie was arrested for prostitution and was sentenced directly. I couldn't even proceed with the lawsuit against her. The little boy's surgery wasn't successful, and he died on the operating table. When Linda found out, she completely broke down. Within a few months, with nothing left, she went to find her ex-husband. She planned to use the same old tricks, hoping to get back together with him. But his new wife was not someone to be trifled with. She hired some people to beat Linda up. It's unclear whether they hit her head, but from then on, Linda became mentally unstable. 6 months later, I graduated smoothly. While all my peers were still worrying about whether to find a job or pursue graduate studies, I was successfully admitted to graduate school without taking the entrance exam. At the same time, I started my first company. From then on, every day of my life was filled with sunshine.